Come on then, Peter. Are you the new Pep Guardiola? Are you enjoying this coaching malarkey?
Do you know what? I love seeing the kids' faces, you know. Like, I think any time you meet a footballer as a kid, I remember myself, you know, if I saw anyone, I'd just follow them, and, you know, whatever they were doing, I'd take in all, you know, everything they were doing. And when you see the kids' faces and you know, they look up to you, and, you know, most of them seem to be talking about the robot. I think that seems to have moved. They seem to have moved on a little bit now. You know, the Ronaldo C seems to be taking over. But no, they're having a great time, and it's nice to be a part of it, and hopefully pass on a little bit of knowledge so they improve as well.
You've done, I think, one of your podcast episodes detailed strange tactical kind of instructions that you've been given over the years. Are you someone to bamboozle the kids with tactical? Are we getting them in triangles? Are we overlapping? What's the sort of Peter Crouch approach to coaching and tactics?
Well, honestly, I think that would be Rafa. I always wonder about Rafa and his kids. I'm sure he sets them up in different formations. But for me, I've got 4 young kids, and I know, you know, enjoyment's number one, isn't it? If we can pass on a little bit of knowledge and they can improve by the end of the week as well, then I think we're doing our job. So you can't, especially with some of the younger ones, you know, a bit of information overload. You just got to make sure they enjoy it, and hopefully they're improving by the end of the week.
You talk on Rafa Benitez there, of course, sacked unceremoniously by Everton just a couple of weeks ago, Peter. We had John Terry on our show last week. He's made no secret to us of his dislike of Rafa. 2 men who just didn't get on. He says it. He says, I didn't like Rafa. Rafa probably didn't like me. Jermaine Pennant's gone on record as saying he felt like a robot under Rafa. You've played under a litany of managers. I want to touch on a couple of them. Rafa, I know you've said it on your podcast. Is he the one that would just blow your mind on a daily basis?
I think so, yeah, because, you know, very, very different. He was very aloof, very standoffish with a lot of players. I don't think anyone ever got a well done from him. You know, if you win 4 or 5-0, he'd bring you straight back to earth about where you went wrong or what you did wrong, rather than, you know, boosting you up. You know, very different to like Harry Redknapp, for instance. You know, a great man manager who would put his arm around you and tell you how brilliant you were. On a daily basis, he'd look at Luka Modric and Rafa van der Vaart, and I remember sitting on the sideline with him once, and he was like, look how good these are, you know, like, just go out and play, basically. Whereas Rafa was very much the opposite. And I get what Pennant's saying, you know, it was quite robotic, but I think if you buy into Rafa's tactics and you're all pulled together and believe in what he's saying, I think you can achieve big things. And for me, he's a top manager, and he gave me the opportunity to work at a club like Liverpool, and, you know, I feel very proud of that fact. So, you know, you won't hear me slagging off Rafa ever. So, he gave me the opportunity to play for the best club in the world.
Did you ever get any instructions and you thought to yourself, I have no idea what this guy is talking about?
Well, there were times, and listen, you know, I'm going to sit here and say, you know, there were times where, you know, he would do things and it would be, you wouldn't agree with them, but, you know, there's lots of different managers that have done that for me, and you've thought, I don't agree with this, but at the end of the day, they're the manager. I think you have to respect their decision, and if that's, you know, if it doesn't work, then of course you can have a polite word, but you still have to do what the manager says, I think.
Robbie and I were talking about it on the drive down here today, Peter, and of course you're someone who, you're in tune, I think, with what football fans kind of want to hear. You want to give an insight into the inner sanctum of a dressing room. Brendan Rodgers, after Leicester's Nottingham Forest defeat at the weekend, he came out, didn't name names, but he basically made it clear there were 3 or 4 players not hitting the heights, believing their own hype. And we were wondering, you as players, do you watch the press conferences of your manager? Do you take heed of what he says on a Thursday or a Friday before a weekend, or does that just...
Do you know what I think? There's maybe a misconception that players, you know, don't listen to what's reported, or don't read the papers, or don't listen to their manager's press conference on a Friday. It's utter lies. I listen to everything, you know, and like, if it's going well, I'll be listening to it, and if it's going badly, I'll often bury my head in the sand. But yeah, listen, you know what the manager's saying. You know, you can't hide from the fact. You know, you'll be reminded of it. You know, the players will remind you of it first and foremost. Have you heard what the manager said about you, just to stir things up? But yeah, I mean, listen, you do have to be wary of what the manager says, of course, in the press conferences. And I think, you know, if someone targeted me like that, you know, believing that you're not pulling your finger out, or you're believing your own hype, then that would hurt me pretty deeply, and I think I'd come out fighting.
And just on that, Peter, because he didn't name names, now we can all speculate as to who we think it was. You as players, when a manager does that, are you all looking at one another and going, yeah, that's you, pal?
Yeah.
Are you?
Without doubt. I think the players will know in that dressing room. And for someone like Brendan, who's a likeable guy. I like Brendan Rodgers a lot as a person. I think he's a fantastic manager. For him to do that, I think there must be some serious, problems there, some issues that he's not been happy with. Certainly after the Forest game, it was a disaster really. So, I think those players certainly have to look in the mirror, and I think those players in the dressing room, they've got some big characters in that dressing room, like Kasper Schmeichel, Jamie Vardy, who's been there a long time, and they've seen it, they've won things at that club, they've done things that no Leicester players have achieved really. So as senior players, I think it's up to them as well to weed those players out and not let them get away with it.
The intangibles in football. We were just talking to Bobby actually, who just commented on how upbeat and buoyant the West Ham dressing room must be right now for them to be performing kind of above the level that you would expect them to perform. And by the same token, right now at Man United, the stories that are coming out speak about an unhappy kind of camp of players. How much of an impact does it make on a team's performance, just that mood, that ambience, if you like, inside those four walls?
There's so much. I mean, I've played in really, really talented teams with a dressing room that was fractured and not together, and you achieve far less than a dressing room of less talented players who are pulling in the right direction, who have the right attitude, who get on. It does make such a difference, and I think obviously winning helps. As soon as you're winning games, everything's a lot easier. But the moment you're losing and the attitude's bad is when you really do struggle.
24/7 news cycle, the advent of social media as well, Peter, means that there is a thirst from not just journalists who have gone through university to get their degrees. Everyone is like an amateur sleuth wanting to get the little nuggets of information. We've seen a lot lately, certainly from a lot of clubs, seems to be a lot of leaks coming out. You guys are human at the end of the day. You've got friends, those friends have got other friends, and then journalists get wind of it. Have you ever been in a situation where you as a team in a dressing room have called out a player and said, hey, we know it's you, quit it, because this isn't helping us to achieve what we want to achieve? Yeah,
I think maybe I'm a little bit old school, but I feel like what goes on in the dressing room should stay in the dressing room. Obviously now, with my podcast and things like that, I talk about things that have happened, but I'm not throwing anyone under the bus. I'm talking about quite funny stories that have happened and giving people, sort of a bit of inside knowledge into that. But if you're playing and you're in the dressing room and things are coming out, my pet hate at the moment is agents that come out and speak on behalf of players. The way I'd see it, if my agent came out and spoke, that is a reflection of what I'm saying. Yeah. So the moment that agent comes out and goes, we're going to Real Madrid for 80 odd million, is the moment that it's coming out of the player's mouth, I think. And as a manager or as a club or as players, I think you get hold of the player, because they can always hide behind their agent, say, it's just him, but
he's an employee.
It's not. Yeah, it's coming from the player, and the less we hear from agents, I think, the better on the transfer policy of one of the players.
The podcast is amazing. It's a fantastic listen, and obviously it was. I'm sure it's been quite an adventure for you to do it, and I would imagine when you set about it, it's morphed into this kind of monster that you probably never envisaged could end up like that. But when you look at the sort of, I don't know, let's call it the traditional media around football, the players that are speaking through agents and carefully choreographed on social media, and the pundits that kind of have a lot of cliches and kind of, they're speaking in riddles a lot of the time. How impactful has it been to kind of go rogue, if you like, and be a lot more authentic in that sort of space where you're allowed to sort of, you're allowed to be your true self, if that makes sense?
But that's exactly what it was about, really. But I had no clue that it would go to the levels or reach the levels that it has done. I mean, it's what everyone asks me about now. It's like my football career is gone, and all I get is little nuggets or quotes from the podcast. Back stronger, various bits and pieces that we say, and I love it. It's my favourite thing I do. I get to sit there, I get to reminisce about stories. Thankfully, my wife will tell you that I've got a terrible memory, but with football and some of the things I've done, I don't forget anything. And I can remember, we sit down and we have a beer and we sit down and just talk about old times, and it just goes off in tangents. And it's
how prepped is it? Because each episode has a structure, but
we have an amazing structure that our producer George maps out for us, and we don't stick to any of it. I mean, there's an introduction to one episode that became a whole episode, and it was only supposed to be the introduction, and then we just called it that name. And just bizarre, but so much fun. And when we were sitting there at the palace with Prince William, chatting about my local curry house in Ealing, it was surreal, but good fun.
I've started a podcast with Robbie Fowler, former teammate of yours, and again we're slightly different. We're getting his old teammates on, and we're reminiscing and talking about various things. And he showed me a picture where he's carrying you, Peter. I'm not sure if you've seen this picture.
Yeah, I know it well. In
sure
Singapore.
You do. Singapore, that's the one. Talk to him about Robbie and your relationship with him.
Absolutely love him. Do you know what? Obviously, growing up, he started a bit earlier than me, and loved him as a player, and just players that play with a smile on their face, and players that excite you, and he did both of those things, and loved him as a player. But then people say don't meet your heroes, and then he re-signed for Liverpool, and while I was still there, and just absolutely loved him as a person as well, and. Good person to be around and a top player.
In terms of his finishing, because one thing I've noticed, there's a thread when any guest that we've had on has said you were natural, Robbie. It gets his back up. He hates being called a natural finisher, because his words would be, well, it implies that I didn't have to work hard. And he said I worked my nuts off to get to where I was. In terms of his finishing, though, as good as a finisher that you've had the pleasure of playing with?
Yeah, because he just had all types of finish. He could be cute. He was good in the air when he needed to be. Could volley a ball. Had a tremendous left foot. And he had that power as well. No backlift. All types of goals, and obviously he was nearing the end of his career when he was at Liverpool with me, but you could still tell any kind of finishing drill was just fantastic, and probably the best. I mean, Defoe was good. Defoe was a very good finisher as well, but something magical about Robbie's left foot.
What's the story from your podcast, Peter, that gets more reaction than any other, or at least has provoked more kind of, maybe that surprised you as to how people have reacted to it?
Well, there's been lots of little taglines. I mean, obviously we had the spray and ace thing recently. We had right in the early days, obviously the Samrat Curry House, which is blown up, which I still don't get a free meal for. Obviously there's a fella called Carl who gets a little mention, which I won't mention the exact line of what we say to Carl, but that one and back stronger, the whole tagline, little nuggets of sayings that have just taken off, and everywhere I go now, people trying to kiss the ring and various different things that happen. It's crazy to think that many people are listening. And it's great fun to do.
Well, with you, Peter, Robbie's listed a few of your clubs. You played for a litany. Queen's Park Rangers in there as well, Aston Villa, of course, as well. Where is the club that you most felt at home? Where, when you look back on your career, did you think, the manager, the players, the fans, the environment, that's a bit of me, that is?
Yeah, there's probably two. I think obviously my debut season was at QPR, and I'm from Ealing, so I used to train at QPR as a 9-year-old. Went to Tottenham and came back and made my debut at QPR, and all my mates were QPR fans, so they're all in the crowd. And I remember they, got to the stage where I think we were about 18, 19. They used to have a bet on a Saturday, like have a fiver on me or something, and I scored about 5 or 6 or 7 first goals that year, and it was whether or not we could go out that night. It was when I looked up in the crowd, the lads were just, it was a dream to them to be, they nicked a few quid and we went out. But we had that one, and we also had playing for Liverpool was special. I mentioned obviously Rafa signing me for the greatest club in the world, in my opinion, and we just off the back of Istanbul 2005. They'd just won the Champions League, and then that's when I signed for them. The club couldn't have been any more high profile. I had 3 years there. Got to another Champions League final, won the FA Cup, played in a Super Cup. A great team, a great city, and that was where I probably felt like I was playing my best football. I had great times at Portsmouth, Southampton, Tottenham, Villa. All of them had little times, but that period at Liverpool I just felt was I was playing the best. I think I scored 10 goals in a calendar year for England. It was just a good time for me personally to be playing football at a top club.
I want to ask you about Stoke, if possible, because you've obviously heard the refrain, I bet he can't do it on a rainy night in Stoke. Was that something that permeated the kind of ethos of the club? The fact that you guys were kind of bulletproof on a Tuesday night at an 8 p.m. kickoff. Was that something that you kind of paid any kind of homage to?
Oh, I loved it. Honestly, it was one of the funniest things. Watching teams get off the bus. I always remember watching Arsenal get off the, like we always be, like the thing is we should go for the fixtures and we go Arsenal. You go, we win that one, we win that one. You look at like what kind of points total you could accumulate. We look at Arsenal at home and they're the top team. We'd go, that's a banker. And we just tick them off. And I always remember them getting off the bus, and you could see they had their hoods up, and they were just cold to the bone. They just didn't want to be there. And I remember we trained on the middle of the pitch the day before under Tony Pulis. We churned it all up, so they couldn't. We'd grown the grass to about this long, and we'd removed the advertising hoarding so Rory could fizz in these throw-ins. And honestly, I remember Aaron Ramsey looking at me, and the grass was that long, he couldn't see his boots, and he just said to me like, "Crouch," and I was like, "I'm sorry, mate. I didn't do it." It just we'd always have an edge over a team. You could see it, and the best teams dealt with it so well. I think Man United at that stage were a top team, but they still had a toughness to them, a toughness that you'd still get beat. Man City towards the end there, Vincent Kompany, the boys, you could sell. It was still top players, but they were hard as nails, and we couldn't get to them.
If they were wearing gloves, you knew you had them.
It was usually like plus it was a definite no at Stoke.
Were Rory's throw-ins as good as a corner?
Oh, they were unbelievable, honestly. You've never seen anything like it. Like it was the trajectory. A lot of people have long throws, but you still have to go up first. This rose like a golf shot. It was just like that. And the people that piled in. Before I arrived there, you had Abdullah Faye, you had Kenwyne Jones. You had Ryan Shawcross, Robert Hoof, Danny Higginbottom. There was big fellas running in at you. Seen many a goalkeeper crumble under the pressure of it.
I love that. We were just hearing from Bobby as well, and listen, Peter, I know it's hot, so we won't keep you much longer. Bobby was telling us, he was reminiscing about Scholesy playing for Fulham at Old Trafford, and he was saying that Rio loved to commentate. Scholesy would hit one of his zingers, and Rio would be like, Scholesy, stop it. Defenders that used to commentate in your ear, there must be one or a couple that you'd be like, give it a rest, would you?
God, the big talkers, yeah. Rio's the worst for that.
Was he?
Only because, even now, like when we're watching BT games, obviously we're not on camera during the game, and all you can hear is, this, and you get all these noises coming out of him, everyone does a bit of skill or a tackle, or it's great though, because he loves it. But yeah, he was a good talker, but I think in the early days, I remember playing against Keith Curl, and he was in your ear a lot. The biggest lesson I ever had was my first season at QPR. I think it was Steve Bold and Tony Adams, and I thought, I was banging them in the Championship. I thought, I'm ready for the Premier League now. Played against those two, and quickly realised I wasn't.
Very
I got
quickly.
taught a lesson.
Quickly on England, Peter, before we let you go, obviously it's a situation now where Gareth Southgate has a embarrassment of riches from which to choose. Finalists at the Euros, a lot of optimism surrounding the team heading into the World Cup this year. If you're picking the team now, are you going for those kind of more dynamic, dare I say, creative players like your Bellinghams, your Fodens, even someone like Jacob Ramsey who's coming through, or are you sticking with the kind of the formula that Gareth has kind of abided by, which has been the more kind of pragmatism first kind of approach? How are you sort of approaching it?
I think there's an element of both. I know as fans we all we want to get them all in. We want to get Rashford's, Foden's, Grealish. We want to get all these mavericks in the team, and I think there's an element. Obviously, speaking to Joe Cole, Joe Cole's one of those mavericks. He's like, get them all in the team and let them work it out. They're top players, but I think to get to a final, which we did. I think people forget that we got to a final the first time in however long it is now. It's been a long time, and I think having Declan Rice, I think sometimes having Calvin Phillips in there, I think it does give us a balance. I think if you play against top teams, I think you do need that stability. But against the worst teams, I think maybe go out and let players express themselves. But I've got a little foot in both camps, but I certainly understand what Gareth's doing, and I think he deserves maybe a hell of a lot less criticism for the job he's achieved. I know we've got some top players with England now, but I still think he's done an incredible job.
You can obviously hear from my accent that I don't care
what
England.
You don't care one bit.
Do not give two
you
Scoobies.
Actively care the opposite
the
direction.
opposite way. Just don't want them winning anything. That being said, two for me, Peter. I've got to get your thoughts. Phil Foden and Jude Bellingham. I mean, they are two young men with the world at their feet. For me, they have got the potential, and it is only potential. I don't want to put too much pressure on them. They've got the potential to be the two best players in their position on the planet, in my opinion.
Well, when I look at Phil Foden this year, I think he's become sort of almost Man City's biggest threat and biggest player. At such a young age, his ability is phenomenal. I think he's improved sort of at the rate that everyone inside Man City believed he could get to, but I think he's getting there now, and I think if he steers clear of injuries, he could be one of the most talented players that we've ever seen, and the most decorated. I think if he's going to carry on at the Man City team, I mean, how many Champions League, how many leagues, how many cups is he going to win there? And with England as well, I think I love him in that deep position, where he can spread the play, he can play wide, he can score goals. And Jude Bellingham the same. I mean, watching him in the Champions League, just bossing games, is an absolute joy.
Is it nice to see English players go out and spend time in a league like the Bundesliga now? That wouldn't happen, say, 20-25 years ago.
Yeah, it really is. I think you still think the Premier League's the best league in the world, but sometimes these young players don't break through at the rate they want to. They're 18, 19 and they feel like they should be playing. I think Sancho, the way he went out and did it, done fantastically well. And with the financial clout maybe of the English clubs, that they can eventually come back. But I think it's a great way of doing it. I went on loan, obviously. For me, the loans that I had really progressed me as a player. And if these players can go and play in a top league like the Bundesliga, come back with so much experience and so much game time, and improve them no end.
Last one from me, Peter. We're into mid-February now. Of course, the talk turns to the individual accolades. We saw, albeit in the Champions League, Bernardo Silva, another incredible performance from him last night. You've got the podcast, It Will Be Back. You've got your Mail Online column. This is a question I'm sure you'll be answering in your column in the next coming weeks. In terms of Player of the Year this year in the Premier League, Silva, Salah, they would seem to me to be the two real standouts. Are they the two
Cancelo,
for you?
maybe
Cancelo, maybe João Cancelo.
Yeah,
anyone else?
Fantastic. Anyone else? I think. I mean, listen. If you're gonna have a two, it's got to be a Liverpool and a City player. I think Cancelo's a definite shout. Bernardo Silva for me. Phil Foden's got to get in there. But yeah, Mo Salah is the standout player this year. Obviously I know he's gone away with the African Cup of Nations, but still, banging in goal after goal. It's like every time he plays, I do a lot of the games for BT, and every time I watch him, he's scoring goals. It's Champions League. It's relentless, and I think we sometimes take greatness for granted. With Ronaldo and Messi, we just assume they're going to score 50, 60 goals a season. Salah, I think, is getting to those levels where you just assume he's going to get 30 goals a season. I think it's easy to forget how difficult that is in the Premier League. So, Mo Salah, standout candidate for me.
When are we going to hear a fresh episode of the Peter Crouch podcast next?
Oh, mate, it's been too long. I know that. It's all people say to me is, when's the pod back? Back stronger. Even when I put anything on social media about anything else, it's like, yeah, it's all right. Stop messing around and bring the pod back. No one's interested in anything else I'm doing. Football Escapes don't care. Get us the podcast back. It's coming back. It's coming back within, I think a little bit of promotion in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be back within a month.
And then Football Escapes, final word. We started there, let's finish there. I think it's fair to say we're not going to see you in a dugout anytime soon. Is that fair to say, Peter?
Do you know what? I've done my coaching badges and I'm ready. If anyone asks me, Stevie G, if you need a hand, I'm ready to go. But
have you done your coaching badges?
I've done my badges, yeah. Do you know what? I did my coaching badges, and then I did a book and a podcast, and the book and the podcast just went off and went crazy, and I just followed that sort of path really. But anything I enjoy, that that's the way I go. It's for any other reason really. If I'm enjoy it, I'll do it. And who knows? Coaching might happen in the later years. When people are tired of my podcast and tired of my stories, then I might go down the coaching route. But I've enjoyed, like this week for instance, I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you're not going to be a stranger. You're going to be back with Football Escapes here, I'm sure, in the future.
100%. I mean, listen, I've been coming to Dubai for a long time. 10 years. My kids have grown up coming here and stuff, and this is just the first time I've done Football Escapes. But I've absolutely loved it. I've loved being a part of, seeing the kids so happy. My kids have done the course as well, and watching my little girl for the first time sort of be into football. Has been great for me, so definitely we'll be back as a family.
This is the last one, I promise you, Peter. Sean, your brother-in-law, is a big fan of our show. He lives out here in Dubai. Abby, of course, your wife's brother. Give us a story about Sean. Keep it clean. He's a good lad, is Sean?
He's a good lad, Sean. Yeah. Cool stories about him. Do you know he played with?
He did. I know
he played with Jamie Vardy at Fleetwood. He's a good footballer, Sean. So I don't know if many people know that. Obviously, he's got his KO8 gym stuff out here in Dubai, which is going really well. But we've got a dad's game here tonight. Put it this way: if he's down here, it'd be my team.
Brilliant. That's too complimentary. Listen, Peter, bless you, my man. Best of luck with the podcast. Well done on Football Escapes. I know Sam and the team love having you as part of the family, and it is a family with Football Escapes. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Dubai Eye 103.8.
Join the conversation.